First responders. We are the first to arrive and the last to forget. We suffer in silence, and that needs to change. With the help of our peers and allies, we are finally finding our collective voice. Now we just need people to listen.
We're here to help people that have been diagnosed with PTSD to understand the diagnosis and have a place that they can come and relax and just be themselves. They don't have to be on guard here.
This area here is purposely set up with the quilts and whatnot to give the effect of grandma's house, essentially where you think of safe. This marks the quieter half, except for the shop. This is the more active house and also where the sleeping quarters are. The X at the bottom actually marks the dead center of middle of nowhere. Because we are in the middle of nowhere, that's the center of nowhere. Now you know where it is. This area here is the more active area. Dartboard, billiards, ping pong, board games, which I understand are back in vogue, and they got their own little coffee shops. I don't know what they're called, but they've got them now. This is the kitchen area, and it is a busy, 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 busy area. Currently we have one chef, one chief cook, one bottle washer, one vacuumer, one cleaner, one manager of a person with PTSD, me, and that'd all be my wife, Jo.
Originally, the idea was for our parents to come and live with us because the house is crazy big. Well, they decided they liked their houses, so they changed their mind. So then it was just Bob and I and Maggie Dog at that point in this big, huge house, wondering, what are we going to do with this space? It came out that, hey, share the space. Open it up. We understand PTSD and living with PTSD, and it seems to work for Bob. So, why not?
I've probably had PTSD most of my career. Not diagnosed for the first enormous amount of years. Rally Point actually was created my first day doing group therapy. Within the first hour, I'd say after I was there, I realized that what we had was something that other people were looking for.
One of the criteria that we set out is that we would like a referral from a therapist or a psychologist. It's kind of our way of pushing the point that, sure, if you want to come down, you have to go see a therapist first.
It's one of the things that most people with PTSD in the chronic stages, not the acute, the chronic, suffer from a purpose misplacement, if you will, and they need a new purpose, a new goal, something to work towards. On the lathe right now is a pen that's being created for one of the guests' daughter. Many of the psychologists, psychiatrists want their clients to actually document what's going on. What better way to do it than with something you created yourself, and they have something in their hand that's tangible, that they can connect with. Even if they're stressing out somewhere later, and they can grab it and remember back to when they were here. Some guests use cooking as their relief. If they want to do this, Jo more than gladly steps aside. So, another area where they may not have thought of themselves being employed in before, now could be a natural home for them. There's institutions across the country. Most of them cost quite a hefty price tag for people to be in to visit. So if they've got workers' comp, then they can probably find their way down there. What about the people that aren't? Where do they go? How about their families that are trying to understand what's going on with mom or dad, because it's a different person?
If we can do what we can to help the spouses, help the kids understand that mom or dad are going to be okay, it's just they're a little different now, then maybe we can keep the families together.
We have one entire area devoted just to the kids. Interesting thing about kids come in, they look, they know exactly what to do. Go play. The parents can be sitting over in this area, and the two are quite comfortable. If the kids aren't triggering the parents, then the moms and dads don't trigger off each other, and it just works.
If we can keep the families together, then we don't end up with...
Vets that are homeless, or first responders on the streets homeless.
Yeah.
So this is trying to make our workload easier.
Yeah, and ultimately maybe stop a few suicides.
Come as guests, leave as friends.
People call us heroes. It means the world to us. But we're also human. If people can learn to see us as hero and human, then maybe we can start to accept it's okay to be both.
With post-traumatic stress, you have situational post-traumatic stress, which is from a trigger from one specific incident, but you also have a cumulative post-traumatic stress. And with the accumulative, it's basically an over time, all these incidents all add up. For first responders, I mean, the difference is that I guess the best comparison would be they're going to war every day. They're dealing with it from the day they start their career to the day they end their career, which could be 10, 20, 30 years. They're seeing things that most people don't believe exist. All these things, they're seeing them firsthand, and they're seeing them over and over again. So I was a police officer, and in 2009 there was a forest fire that turned into a wildfire. So I got several people out, 8 people actually, and several pets. And at the bottom of the second street, I got trapped. I always tell people, the whole life before your eyes is true. To me, it was like flashcards. You took cards and you just flip through them real fast. Just little snapshots of things in my life. I've been to incidents with regards to burnt up bodies and burnt up cars as part of my career, and I saw myself burnt up and the car burnt up. That's probably one of the hardest things that I still live with today. I see that burnt up car and burnt up me, my colleagues having to come find me, and my family having to have a closed casket. And that hit me really hard. And I realized that at that point in time, this was it. The game was over. It was a police officer years before had put a piece of Bristol board up on the gymnasium wall. White Bristol board, just simple, with black lettering on it. And the black lettering said, "I will survive." It's 3 simple words. That's all it said on it. And it was just in the gymnasium. He put it up, and it was there for years. And for whatever reason, that actually came to my head. What ended up happening was I ended up driving out, but it was a private road, very narrow, and I couldn't remember if there was any turns or any kind of oddities in the road, or if it was straight. I couldn't remember because everything was just fire and smoke. And it was about 280 feet of that. Came to a clearing spot, watched a 6,000 square foot home. Didn't burn, it just basically incinerated in front of me. Beyond that property, there was another 80 feet that I had to do the same thing to. I had to drive up through that, and it was almost, it was like a movie almost. It was like an arch of flames, and I came out through that arch, and I'll never forget, my sergeant actually said to me, he said, "Did you see that? Did you see that? Just, you came out, this arch of flames," and I said, "Yeah, I know. I just drove out through it." I ended up going back in 3 more times because we had reports that there were more people trapped. So eventually, I came out, and I was still on adrenaline. And a colleague of mine came up to me in an unmarked police car, and when he saw me, he said, "You okay?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Look in the mirror." And I looked in the rearview mirror, and my face was black, covered in soot and everything. And they had an ambulance come to meet me right there. And then in the end, a police officer in a police car drove me lights and sirens into the emergency. In the end, I end up with both permanent and repairable lung damage. I have nerve damage from my neck down to my hands. The nerve damage, the best way to describe it is constant pain every day. And then, of course, post-traumatic stress disorder. I have severe post-traumatic stress disorder, situational, from that fire.
I actually got my start as a volunteer firefighter in Cape Breton when I was 17. Seeking employment, I had to move to the city and ended up getting a job as a communications officer. And in year 2000, I went back to school and received my paramedic level 1 certificate. As a dispatcher, you're different kind of stress. You're in a no sight, no hands-on environment, and you're trying your best to listen to what people tell you on the phone, make sense of what's being said, and then try to provide help. For years and years for me, it was a job. I would go in, process the calls or dispatch the ambulances as I was supposed to. But eventually, I guess after, close to 20 years, the calls started to have an effect on me. And instead of just, giving instructions, dealing with the caller and then hanging up, sometimes, feelings would linger after the calls of not having control, of feeling useless, of not doing everything I could. I started questioning myself. I hit rock bottom Christmas Day, December 25th, 2017. I went into work after being awake for 2 or 3 days straight, and I just walked into my work and said, I'm done. I've tried to deal with this for the past few months, but this thing's caught me. I need to go off work. Being in a job for 20 years, and all of a sudden I'm home. I'm sick. I'm scared about what lies ahead for myself and my family. I'm scared for my income, and I'm most of all scared that nobody would believe me. The first thing I did was to schedule an appointment with my family doctor. Once I did get to see my family doctor, she was extremely understanding and immediately told me that I suffered a workplace incident, that I had PTSD. I told her no, that wasn't the case. I was just burnt out, needed a few months off to get back to myself, and I'd be good to go. And came to the point where, I'm arguing with my family doctor over the diagnosis. And I think there's quite a few people out there that to one degree or another are suffering from PTSD and are not getting the help they need because they're denying it or don't realize they have it. And I'm a perfect example of that. I worked myself until I could work no more.
As a first responder, a PTSD diagnosis rarely spells relief. The first thing you think is, no, not me. We're type A people. We eat, sleep, and breathe the job. We are the job. The idea of losing that is terrifying.
So I've been a police officer for over 23 years. During my career, I've worked in patrol division, criminal investigative division, intelligence division. I did a lot of undercover work with prostitution. Basically all the sexual deviancies back when I was doing undercover work. When you think that you've seen it all at one point. Like nothing else is going to shock you, no matter, because you've just seen so many horrific things. And then it just keeps continuing. In the summer of 2015, I came to a point of, like a breaking point. It's the only way to describe it. It's just one day I just lost my memory. I wasn't functioning. I knew something was drastically wrong, and a retired police officer friend of mine had met me that day when I was on shift and suggested I go to see a doctor right away, so in which I did. I wasn't in the doctor's office 5 minutes, and he recognized that I had severe symptoms. Shortly after that, I was diagnosed with severe PTSD. I also have major depressive disorder, as well as I have disassociation. It's almost like you leave your body and watch what's happening. And a lot of you don't have a memory. Most times, I'll lose chunks of time, whether it's hours, days, weeks, sometimes months. My short-term memory is extremely limited. I've suffered a lot of cognitive disabilities. That doesn't sound right. I have cognitive disability in several areas, and currently going through treatment to help with that. It kind of felt like it just happened out of nowhere, because I certainly didn't expect to ever be in this position that I'm in. But in hindsight, after and looking back on it and going through therapy, I realized that I was suffering for many, many years. Of course, you don't recognize it then, and police officers, back in the day, like that's, we were told to suck it up. You'd never complain about it, especially as a female and having to prove yourself continuously. There's a huge stigma around the injury that I have. Sorry, I'm forgetting again. And this is part of my injury. I will lose my train of thought. If you put a sneaker in a dryer and you let it bounce around in there, that's sort of how I feel my thoughts come into my brain and out of my brain, and you can't focus on anything. I'll look at something, and it's something that you see every day. Say it's a lamp, and you're trying to say lamp, but the word just doesn't come to you anymore. You might say it's a clock instead, but know the difference and know that you're saying the wrong thing, but you still can't seem to connect that.
The scale of trauma that first responders deal with is beyond most of our imagining. Horrendous carnage, multiple deaths of vulnerable people, deaths in highly poignant or unusual circumstances. The average police officer over the course of his or her career will encounter somewhere between 160 and 170 traumatic events in their working life.
I've been involved with a number of line of duty fatalities, both with fire and with policing. Numerous fire fatalities, industrial fatalities, motor vehicle fatalities, cardiac arrests, homicides, double homicides, suicides.
It's different to see it on TV versus experience it firsthand. They might see an ambulance going by with its sirens on and lights on, have no idea where it went, and once it's out of sight and and the sound is gone, they forget about it. Whereas that first responder is still going to wherever it is. I think the public needs to realize that These are not normal jobs. They're very abnormal jobs where people are seeing some very horrific things, and that's going to have an effect on them. It's not a matter of, oh, well, you shouldn't have gone into that career. You obviously can't handle it, because I've heard people make those comments when some first responders have, come out and said that they have post-traumatic stress. It's not a matter of that at all. There is no way that anybody can fully be prepared as a first responder for what they're going to see and what they're going to experience.
For a lot of people, what they do for every incident that they're involved with, they'll take and put all their thoughts and feelings and everything in a little shoebox. And because they don't have the time, or they feel they don't have the time to deal with all of it right now, they tuck that shoebox in a closet. For some people, by putting everything in that shoebox and tucking it away, that works for now. But then along comes the next incident.
Eventually, one of these times when you open up that closet door, all those shoe boxes are going to come falling out at you. When they come falling out, they can hit you pretty hard.
We go home at night and our partners will ask things like, "How was your day?" We don't want to burden them, so we smile, say fine, and just continue to carry it.
I had my own little policy of leave work at work and leave home at home. And, gradually things at home just seemed to go downhill for me. I lost the happiness in life. I started to distance myself from my family, from my friends. I started being uncomfortable going outside.
Almost every condition, every emotional condition we can possibly have is improved if you have the support of other people. And if the nature of your condition cuts you off from other people, it makes you much more vulnerable.
The way that a lot of emergency responders kind of took care of their own mental health is after they came back from a bad call, they would talk to the captain or Jack Daniels, Captain Morgan. And they would open that bottle and they'd throw away the cap because they wouldn't need the cap anymore because that liquor was going to be gone.
That's a typical vice that we learned to have. I'm ashamed to say, but I would drink as soon as I got in the door. I would stay in the rec room and just be alone with my dogs, and that's I continued that for years, never saying a word, because I would never want to share the experiences I've had with a loved one or someone I cared for. I was in a long-term relationship with a stepchild, and that after 10 years went to the wayside.
Sometimes partners leave. Sometimes partners leave as soon as they know that there's a problem. Not every partner feels able to face it. And it's happened a number of times that in first responders I've talked to, that they suddenly find themselves not only traumatized, but alone.
I think that part of the reason is that the support mechanisms have to be put in place, not just for the first responder, but also for the spouse and for the family. It's a huge part of what needs to be dealt with. The first responder definitely, there's no question, is primary, but when you've got a spouse who is trying to deal with it and not being given the tools, or family members that are trying to deal with it and they don't have the tools, it becomes very frustrating for them and very stressful for them. And I think, unfortunately, looking at the stats, you would see that there's a lot of first responders who are injured in the line of duty who actually do end up getting divorced.
My mind was telling me that it was no good. My mind was telling me that my wife, even though she was loving and supportive, was at some point going to abandon me. But my wife, understood. Without her, I don't know what the outcome would have been. because she was the constant.
Our lives will never be the same. There's a you before and a you after. Sometimes we don't recognize the face in the mirror. That can be the hardest part, getting to know the new person looking back at you.
Definitely one of the hardest but most frustrating things is when you try to compare yourself to where you were before the incident. I was involved with a tremendous amount of things outside of policing and in policing before the fire. I kept busy. The day of the fire, that all came to a grinding halt, and that was tremendously damaging.
I had 2 boxers at the time, and on top of working out every day, we did a lot of hiking, a lot of walking, a lot of running, just active all the time, and outgoing, social. Didn't show my emotion very much. After I broke, I have almost no ability to control my emotion. My whole life just shut down, basically, that day. Everything just stopped or ceased to be what I knew. And then since then, it's been trying to unravel this mess.
One of the things with post-traumatic stress disorder is that we will put up a facade. We can hold that facade for a short period of time. It becomes very draining. And then once that facade drops, we actually crash. Total exhaustion. I'll get people today who will say, "Oh, it's great to see Kevin, the Kevin that I know back." And my response to them is, on a good day, I'm about 50%.
Most of the first responders that I've dealt with who have post-traumatic stress disorder have at least experienced suicidal ideation. One of the great predictors of suicide is hopelessness. People who feel that this isn't going to get any better. And that's one of the dangers with PTSD, that people don't think they'll get better, that they're going to be dealing with this for the rest of their lives.
The reality is there's a lot of first responders that are getting to a point where they never thought they would get, to a dark place they never thought they'd ever be, and then ending up taking their own lives.
A lot of the people that do finally succumb to the PTSD, it's because they've done more. They have sucked it up to that point, and their bucket just overflowed. And unfortunately, sometimes once that bucket falls over, you can't right it again.
We've lost too many first responders and veterans to suicide, and part of my goal is for us not to have any more.
Workman's comp, they gave me an appointment with a well-known psychiatrist. When the treatment and the medications kicked in and the clouds cleared, I was in shock at my life, at what it had become, how stagnant it had become, how sick I was. I realized that, oh my God, I've been sick for probably 2-3 years, especially the past 6 months, and I didn't know it. I'm still involved with the fire department. The fire department wasn't the cause of where I am. It was actually almost like a lifeline to me. One day at the station, I seen a little pamphlet on the wall that I had ignored for 2 weeks. This brochure seemed to match me exactly. I was a first responder. I'm suffering from PTSD, and currently I'm being treated for PTSD. I was a little hesitant, but I did call up and spoke to 2 wonderful people, and they convinced me to come out for a visit So the whole family, we packed up middle of June and spent 2 nights here. And that's been, I guess, another life-altering event of my recovery is coming here. When you're here, you, I guess, almost feel like part of the family here, the way they treat you. These 2 people have dedicated their lives, their home, finances to helping strangers. And I think that is amazing. Had I come across people like Bob and Joanne earlier and realized, the warning signs and the symptoms and my life was going downhill, that I probably could have maybe, sought help sooner. And they may have told me, where to go for help, because I didn't know where to turn to. I'm not fully healed, but definitely a lot better than I ever was. I've taken back control of most of my mind. There's still issues with sleep, but I'm at a level that I didn't think I could be at. Reborn.
With PTSD, the road to healing is a long one, but connecting to nature and animals recenters you. It can help you find your way again.
Somebody had approached me and told me about a program that was here locally where service dogs were going to be trained and placed with injured first responders who had post-traumatic stress disorder. And I eventually decided I'll put an application in. In March of 2016, Maggie arrived, and Maggie changed my life, and Maggie saved my life.
Yeah, you're so good. You could kisses. Thank you for the kisses.
Maggie actually does a number of things, both for the physical injuries and for the psychological. And the things that she does every day. Big thing for first responders who are injured in the line of duty and have post-traumatic stress disorder. They will have flashback nightmares. And I would experience that anywhere from 2 to 10 times a night and wake up just drenched. The very first night that Maggie actually arrived, I was thinking, how long is it going to take me to get used to this dog? How long is it going to take her to get used to my place? And just overall, are we going to gel? And at 3:30 in the morning that very first night, Maggie woke me up, and I haven't experienced that nightmare, scenario since. She actually senses that and smells that coming on. So she actually wakes me up before I have the flashback nightmare, so I don't have to experience the nightmare. She's trained then to lay back down, put her back against my legs or my chest or my back, or even lay on top of me and go back to sleep, and they just kind of re-ground you. And everything is all reward based. So when she wakes me up, I play with her and tell her good girl, and it's just a game to her. It's all a game to her, but it's life-changing and life-saving for me. Everywhere we go, she kind of does a threat assessment on people that are around me. If she thinks that there might be an issue or a problem, she lets me know. And as long as I pay attention to her, then everything is fine. If I don't pay attention to her, she'll eventually say, okay, it's time to go, and she'll remove me from the situation. The gentleman who helped put Maggie in my hands as a veteran, and he had wanted to see that for other veterans. I found myself now in a situation where I wanted to see it for more first responders. And there was a definite need out there for it.
So CIAD stands for Canadian Intervention and Assistance Dogs, and it's actually Gaelic for first or primary. It started out through Kevin and seeing what Maggie did for Kevin and how Maggie's changed his life.
So there were 4 people that got together and co-founded the dog school.
We all sat around a dining room table one night in November and started talking and realized that we can do this.
6 months later, we officially launched, and it's just exploded since then.
We get the puppies at about 8 weeks old, and then they get placed with their family.
When we get them at 8 weeks or whenever they actually get weaned off their mother, it's just basic puppy obedience for the first almost year. You know, you do sit down, stay, place, things like that.
Good girl.
What her, her prescribed tasks are. Those are very dependent upon who the applicant is and who she's going to be going with.
They recommend taking the dog to work with you if you can, and I find it was extra good that I was able to take her to work personally, because where she is going to a first responder, there is definitely a possibility that this could be her workplace, this could be her life. If I do start getting stressed, she will sometimes nudge me or put her paw on me, and that's not something that we've trained her to do. That's just her own instincts. If she provides that much comfort to me, I can't imagine how she's going to change somebody's life who really, really needs her. It is going to be very hard to give her up. The thing that I hold on to is we recently had a friend that lost his battle with PTSD, and I have a family friend in Ontario who has a little girl who has a service dog, and the messages that we send back and forth, I'm gonna hold on to those when the time comes, because it will be extremely difficult, but to know that she's going to someone to potentially actually save their life, I mean, you can't compete with that.
I just recently did my intake interview for a service dog through CI'd. I've seen what Maggie has done for Kevin, and it's truly unbelievable. Like, unbelievable to know where that man was and to know where he is now, and the impact that Maggie's had on his life. Incredible. So through a lot of discussion, it's I'm hoping that I complete the process and they see that I am a candidate for a dog, and I'm hoping that that'll be a tool for me to be able to use to maybe try to enjoy some parts of life, and instead of just wasting away. My dogs were, and still are, a huge support. You're gonna make me cry now. Time out. Okay. Okay, so my dogs. I had two boxers at the time. One was a senior, and the other one is a little bit younger. So they were a godsend, really. It's just, without them, I don't know where I'd be, and that might sound funny, but it's there'd be days I would never get out of bed. Never. Just say a week straight, and those dogs would stay with me by my side the entire time. They became very protective of me, and I know that they sensed there was something happening with me that wasn't good, because they would, when I'd have nightmares at night, if I didn't wake up from it, they would wake me up. And, I look back and I see that as, in their own way, they were therapy dogs to me. And I lost my oldest one in February of this year. But my younger one, she's still going strong. And I'm hoping that if I do receive a service dog, that they'll be the best of friends, and it'll all work out.
When I would go out into public beforehand, people would see me, maybe, but more than likely I just blended in. I'd blend in, say, go get something, a jug of milk, and then leave the store. Now when I go in, I stand out, which can be, a little intimidating. But what ends up happening is, of course, people see a puppy. Oh, what a nice looking dog. I used to have a chocolate lab or whatever kind of comment, so it forces me to reintegrate and to reinitiate conversations. So it brings you back out of your shell, out of that bunkering. The farm, I often said it was a blessing and a curse. It was a curse because it's a lot to maintain and upkeep. It was a blessing though because it made me go and get up and do, because they had to be fed. The animals, even if I was in pain or if I was having a bad day, they still needed to be fed. There were times where I didn't want to come out, even out of the house. However, the farm allowed me, because it's gated, that I had more space when I did want to come out, but still had that privacy and that security kind of thing. Plus, there's also the interaction with those animals. The ability to, we talk about dogs, for example, that, they always have that love, when you walk in the door, they're excited to see you and so on. Well, the rest of the animals, whether it be you giving them a mint or whether it be you bringing them their food or just that they want to have a scratch, you can't help but smile. It kind of gives you a release. Unfortunately, for a lot of people who are suffering, and to be able to go somewhere, I was fortunate because I have all this space, but there are people who I know that don't have that option. Thankfully, there's places out there, Rally Point Retreat being one of them, that has that ability to allow you to have that space to get away from things and to kind of regroup.
It's away from the city noise. You don't feel confined. You don't feel
Trapped.
There's windows everywhere. You can see the outside.
Probably not a lot this size left in Nova Scotia. The wind in the trees, the sun coming down, the air is crisp, fresh. There's no pollution in the air here. The ground is as pure as Mother Nature wants us to have it.
Sometimes we have quiet music in the background. Mostly it's just listening to the outside. Have the windows open and listen to the birds. And in the evening, listen to the crickets and just try to de-stress.
Peer support saves lives. Talking to someone who understands what you're going through makes you realize you're not as alone as you feel.
The first month and a half after everything went public, I had over 6,000 messages from all over the world. Some of those messages were from people just, thanks for sharing your story. Some of them were, a great number of them I should say, were from first responders. Again, thanks for sharing your story and thanks for being somebody on the front lines. Then I had another percentage of the population, which were again first responders, but were first responders who were in trouble. They, for the most part, were afraid to go to their employer because of things that had happened to colleagues of theirs, and they were looking for help. To have somebody contact you who is in dire straits, where their life is on the line, and to be able to get them the help that they need, that's huge to me.
Kevin and I talk quite frequently, and he's an amazing person. He's one of the strongest people I've ever met. When you meet somebody, another first responder that has similar symptoms as you can tell, it's like an instant connection. You can instantly tell when somebody else is suffering in the same way that you are.
I've had a few fellow firefighters come forward once they learned, what was wrong, why I was off, and they've come forward and said, yes, I have PTSD. And it's made them feel better, I think, talking to me about it, and it's made me feel better knowing that there's other people out there, going through what I have.
So normally, yeah, we're all first responders, but usually there's kind of the police and paramedics and fire. Well, what's happening with PTSD, it's actually really linking all those people. So you're seeing people that they're finding a common ground with post-traumatic stress disorder, and they're finding a common ground with not receiving maybe the treatment or the stuff that they need from their employer, reaching out and making those links and being referred to other places for help, things that they didn't even know existed. So, you know, whether it be for a service dog or whether it be for a Rally Point retreat to go and get away and clear their head, or for counseling or whatever. And it's become a very vital part of both the recovery and the survival of first responders.
Of course we have a leak.
Yeah. This end seems to have stopped.
No, this would be where the shingles blew off the other day.
Yeah, and it's in the light.
Oh, is it ever in the light? Let's not turn that light on. How's the roof going to cause ripples? The ripple effect will be not including the water pun, you know, getting it cleaned up, getting it fixed, and then that money that was allocated for that is now somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a deductible we weren't planning on, so now that has to be dealt with. The work is never done. This place has been in a constant state of flux since we moved here. At this point, it's Bob's pension that is feeding everything. We have had a number of donations from wonderful organizations, which has been instrumental in us being able to purchase the adjacent land so that we can develop that in the future for homeless vets and first responders. We don't have charity status yet, so that causes a lot of people to shy away. They can't get the receipts that they want. That's not to say that we're not going to apply for the charity status, but finding the time and the focus to do that when we're doing everything else delays the process. Bob and I are going constantly, which is an extra challenge for him. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's shortly after we moved here. Parkinson's and PTSD don't get along well, so if Bob is stressed or anxious, then his tremors kick into high gear, which makes it very difficult for him to get around and to accomplish the things that he wants to do.
It does add an extra challenge, but it's also a really good incentive. I can't sit back and wait for things to happen. They have to be dealt with right now. They have to be, the ball has to keep rolling forward. Even if it's only a little bit, it has to roll forward.
It's been estimated that upwards of 30% or more of police officers have significant post-traumatic symptoms, if not the full post-traumatic stress disorder. And conservatively, probably at least 25% of those people actually have PTSD at the time. So when you start counting up the number of police officers, divide by 4, that's the number of people who probably have PTSD today working for your local police department in the city.
To me, it's an epidemic. It's, you know, there's so many lives being lost every day, every month, from first responders. And it just seems that nobody wants to really take the initiative.
The onus really is very much on the workplace to educate police officers and EMTs and firefighters to actively show support and to come out. It gives a sense of validation. It also gives a sense that people can talk these things through.
They need to be doing training before the people hit the streets, and they have to do it continuously after they hit the street, because this is a huge part of the daily routine of all first responders.
As I pointed out to police officers, just based on my own experience, in your career, you might be shot at, you might be stabbed, but you are going to be exposed to trauma, for sure, no questions asked. It can happen, I've heard of it happening on your first shift.
In a lot of cases, if the trauma can be addressed within the first 6 months, there's a good chance that they may be able to stave off the PTSD full-blown reaction. But you've got to get that help.
The early interventions that we do with the firefighters and other emergency responders, they will generally give people some tools that they can get back into normal living, and then it will lessen the likelihood that someone is going to end up being diagnosed with PTSD. If we observe an emergency responder who is still really struggling after the interventions that we do, we can fast track them into appropriate mental health professionals.
When I went to school 15 years ago, we had like half a day of, you should do critical incident stress debriefings after a major incident, but that was about it.
Some of the professionals would state that that was not something that was beneficial. They would state that, not everybody wants to participate in that and be in a group setting and spill their feelings out there. I think probably it was more beneficial than people realized, because at least it brought it to the forefront. When that started not happening as much, I think that's probably when more problems started coming about. There's been a huge stigma over the years with first responders and post-traumatic stress disorder. Be tough, be strong, don't let the emotions show.
Suck it up, buttercup.
Suck it up, buttercup.
Suck it up, buttercup is actually one of the ones that you hear people say all the time. But when you've got organizations or people out there that are making comments like PTSD is the flavor of the day, or first responders or police officers shouldn't be looking for the Cadillac treatment in order to get better, or they should be going out and getting help that they need, it's not as easy as that.
Like, it's an actual injury that we sustain to our brain, and it's very, very complex, and it's very difficult, because it's not like seeing a broken arm or broken leg.
If you break your leg, you still have your brain to advocate for yourself to get the help that you need. Organizations need to realize that post-traumatic stress is real, that it is actually a physical injury, that they need to immediately put things in place when a member is diagnosed, and that they need to not turn their backs on the member. And when I say turn their backs on a member, not turn their backs with regards to treatments, but also with regards to the connection, not disconnecting from them, because that's very damaging for the first responder as well.
At this time, I'm still in the recovery phase of my illness, and I'm doing quite well. But at some point, maybe in the next couple of months, I'm going to have to look into some very serious career choices. As my doctor said, you've put your 20 years in, and you paid your price for that, and now it's time to look after yourself and move into something that's going to help you and your family.
I'm hoping that I can somehow regain parts of me that I lost, or at least some parts of me, some semblance of something that I used to be, but just to be able to enjoy what's left of my life in some manner. I don't know what that's going to look like. I know it's not going to look like what it was like before, but I hope one day I can feel happy. It's when you're suffering from the PTSD that I have, it's very difficult to see anything good in life, and it's even harder to find any kind of happiness at this point.
I want first responders that are struggling and having issues to see things like this, realize they're not alone, realize there's help, but also realize that they're normal. It's an abnormal situation that you've experienced, but it's a normal reaction.
We're all human. We're not superheroes. We shouldn't be going through our lives feeling the way we do with PTSD.
The fact that you have PTSD doesn't make you weak, doesn't mean that you've done anything wrong. It may be hard to figure this out from your old perspective. But this is a predictable effect. It's a symptom.
You shouldn't be ashamed to ask for help. You're brave to ask for help. It's not shameful.
The more open people are about it and talking about it, the better we'll all be. I mean, being here right now doing this documentary is something I never would have agreed to a couple of years ago. But the word has to go out that, this is a silent syndrome and needs to be addressed.
Find somebody you can trust to talk to, whether it's a family member, a friend, a colleague, a superior. Just reach out to somebody.
If you don't know where to turn, start here. And we can do our absolute best to direct you to the help and the resources that are available. Don't bury it down deep, because it'll come back at the worst possible time, and the trauma will be dealt with, whether you want to deal with it right now or you want to deal with it later.